Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane. It's the morning of Wednesday, 7th of March, 2018. And the title of today's morning monologue is someone taking the fracking? Because it's certainly looking that way. And I'm not going to conject as to whom might be driving this. But let's take a look at what's occurring right now, because we have a rising tide of opposition towards the unconventional gas agenda in this country. And yet, elements of the British government seem determined to push ahead with one of the most unpopular agendas possibly since the advent of Maggie Thatcher's poll tax, which of course she just put in by another name. And it's almost like somebody is saying, you know what, let's find out how many people, what percentage of the population are actually capable of independent thought, and how many are so locked into debt slavery that even if they do know, they're more motivated to push ahead with increasing their material wealth than they are to take care of the environment for future generations. Now, some people, of course, are caught up in the survival trap. They are desperately trying to keep a roof over their head and food on the table, and actually keep their families in some kind of reasonable health, despite efforts, with the crap food and everything else to destroy that health. And, for a country that has been recently identified as top of the league table in Europe in terms of eating crap, with over 50% of the food sold in this country being processed, not really surprising that there's an increase in serious negative health conditions, despite the fact, of course, that the government is determined to destroy the NHS, making healthcare nigh on inaccessible to those who don't have the financial wherewithal to obtain private healthcare. So what's occurring is blatantly obvious, and the British government and their spokesmen and women are becoming more and more blatant in basically giving the British public the finger and saying, you know what, we know there's a few of you out there who know what we're doing. We know there's a few of you out there who realise that this agenda is so destructive that it could actually lead to the fulfilling of the economic forecast that was put out, in fact, about a year or so ago now, which forecast the population in this country dropping potentially by some 75% over the next 2 or 3 decades. Now, right now, that, of course, sounds completely absurd and no doubt would be dismissed by many as just a rampant conspiracy theory. But, once momentum is maintained and reaches a critical mass, then going off the edge of a very, very slippery slope to the edge of the cliff doesn't actually take much of a push. And so what's occurring right now is potentially a move to destroy this nation's capability and capacity to actually feed itself or provide water. And this was the headline. Of course, it's back to front for anybody watching on YouTube, but on Facebook. But this was the headline: millions told to ration water. Of course, this is related to the freezing of pipes, but consider the implication of the unconventional gas industry and it draining literally billions of gallons of water from a country that is totally dependent on the natural cycle of water. We have no mass resources like the Great Artesian Basin or the Great Lakes or the Great River System in the US. We are totally dependent on the natural cycle and the limited reservoirs that we have under this country, under the land of this country. So You know, if somebody really wanted to destroy a nation, then they're really going the right way about it. But in reality, it only gets destroyed because we, the people, allow it to happen. And the good news is that, you know, whilst the more and more people starting to wake up to this nightmare, ultimately there's not enough actually doing what needs to be done to bring about the changes that we all know we need to see. And the unconventional gas industry is simply symptomatic of much deeper problems that this country faces. But what it is doing is it is actually bringing people together in this country like nothing before, certainly not since poll tax. I mean, let's look at what millions of people marching around the world did to stop the US and Tony Blair, George Bush and Tony Blair, invading Iraq in 2003. They basically said, yeah, thanks for letting us know what you think, but you're confusing us with someone who really gives a damn. And of course, the rest, as they say, is history. So, you know, marching, petitions, you know, all of these are things that are effectively disempowering, because what they do is they create the impression that you're doing something, and actually no one cares. Yeah, you can argue that they help to raise awareness, but ultimately in the big scheme of things, the impact is minimal. It's not enough. In fact, it's a social safety valve. Yeah, let millions march in London. BBC won't report it anyway. Let millions sign petitions. Hand them into Downing Street. Do you know what happens when you hand them in to the guy who comes to the door in the crisp white shirt and the nice tie? He says, thank you very much, and then throws them in the bin behind the door. Do you really think anybody takes any notice? There's got to be direct participation. And what has occurred in Rydale over the last few months is absolutely tremendous. You know, there's no one thing that you can put your finger on to say, yep, that's what did it. That's what brought about the demise of Barclays Bank trading as Third Energy at Kirkby Misperton. It was a multi-pronged attack from so many different quarters within the community and on a wider basis. The NGOs were supportive. They didn't take the lead roles. It was the community that took the lead role. And it wasn't one group within the community, and it certainly wasn't one individual. It was multiple groups, multiple individuals, and people literally taking the initiative to do whatever they felt they could or needed to do to actually stop this abomination from being unleashed beneath Kirkby Misperton. So for the time being, the population of Kirkby Misperton is off the hook. And they can, at least for the time being, breathe, literally and metaphorically, a little easier. Because Third Energy have confirmed in their recent liaison meeting with the local community that the last of the vehicles associated with the intent to frack KM8 will be removed from the site later this week. And as Lou Hammond said yesterday, they've said they'll be back after Easter, but they forgot to mention which year. They're still blagging that they might be back in October, but not in the current guise, not as Third Energy, and not without some very, very clear statement of just whom has financed them, because at the moment there's no possible way that they are coming back in their current financial status. So Third Energy have said that any further operations, any further movements going on to KM8 will be related to their conventional operations on the lower pad, KMA. But anything that goes on to the mezzanine must be considered to be potentially part of an unconventional gas exploitation. And consequently, anything that goes on to the mezzanine, KM8, will be fair game. And you know, Third Energy, I think, realise that, and Barclays Bank certainly do, which is why Barclays Bank are certainly not prepared to pump any more money in there. So one of the reasons, of course, that, or the primary reason ultimately, that Greg Clark gave, or hasn't yet formally stated, but the reason that we know they haven't been able to go ahead with their frack is because Third Energy were not only late submitting their accounts, but when they did submit their accounts, basically they were a complete crock. And thanks to the great work, again, great researcher, Ben Dean, he's been pursuing through Freedom of Information request an attempt to get from the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy the detail of what these companies are expected to produce in terms of proving their financial resilience. And this is the response that he got from the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, Secretary of State being Greg Clark. The work to assess Third Energy's finances is being undertaken by the Infrastructure and Projects Authority. We expect this work to include indemnities and guarantees. Therefore, the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy does not hold any of the information you have requested. You what? So, come on, Greg. You tried this once before when you said, well, it's not me actually going to sign this off. It's going to be the Oil and Gas Authority. Until, of course, it was pointed out that the Oil and Gas Authority is a private limited company with one single shareholder, and that shareholder is, oh, you, Greg Clark. Now, you're apparently attempting to say, well, actually, yes, well, they are going to have to prove their financial resilience, but not to me. I'm going to deflect this and pass the buck to the, who was it now? Infrastructure and Projects Authority. I mean, it's like the government creates these little cells to get itself out of trouble so that it can sort of just deflect it to one side. Say, well, it wasn't us, it was them. It's Greg Clark, and we know it comes down on your head, however you try and deflect it. So, although the Freedom of Information request has now been submitted, of course, to the Infrastructure and Projects Authority to get the definition from them, and no doubt they'll respond by saying, well, it's not us, actually, you need to contact BEIS. Everybody else's responsibility. So, it's really, really important that communities all around the country that are being targeted by these cowboy companies get on the case and get people within your community who understand the finances, how to understand a balance sheet, and look for the Achilles heels of these companies. Because once it is known as to what the financial criteria is that's being applied, then obviously forensic analysis can be applied to their accounts. And most of these companies really don't have any substance at all. Financial substance, intellectual substance, technical substance. They're cowboy outfits. And many of these companies as well, of course, are so short of cash that what they've been doing is farming out. So what they're doing is they're inviting other companies to come and say take 30 or 40% of the license, which is why Quadrilla have got AJ Lucas and Centrica on board, because they certainly don't have the money as a standalone entity. And all in the south of England, it's UCOG and with Union Jack and with Europa. And, all of these companies, it shouldn't just be the lead player that is subjected to the financial scrutiny. It should be all of the partners on any particular well site where the lead player is the one, of course, who obtains the planning permission and ultimately seeks the permission from the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy to actually initiate the frack. But all of these companies should be subjected to the full financial scrutiny, whatever that may be. And it'll certainly be a financial scrutiny that's applied by the community. Now, UCOG, which is of course been very much in my frame for the past few years, because UCOG are looking to establish an unconventional operation, hydrocarbon operation at Horse Hill, just outside Gatwick Airport. And of course UCOG was once upon a time the domain of David Lenegas, arch blagger, pretty much banned now from participating in any company listed on the British alternative investment market, because he's proven basically to be a blagger. He's there to raise money on behalf of these pisspot companies and obviously extract the hard-earned savings from the gullible punter who buy into the this time next year you'll be a millionaire. Well, UCOG which is in a pretty precarious financial position itself, has had the audacity now to follow Ineos's lead and has published the fact that they are going to seek an injunction against any attempt to impact upon them economically. Now, this is going to be very interesting to see what occurs here, because it could be argued, of course, that by putting this information out on YouTube and Facebook, I am indeed trying to have a negative impact on their capacity and capability to operate, and that would be absolutely true. And you know what? It really doesn't matter what any court says. I'm going to continue to do that, because that will simply expose the degree to which this country is descending into a corporatocracy. And let me tell you that once we get into the unadulterated corporatocracy, then basically, as the receptor, the company and their puppet government really won't give a damn about you. They don't really anyway, but at least they maintain a bit of a charade today. But what's coming, unless it is challenged, is the corporatist state, where the corporation has priority over everything. And as we've seen in the US, the corporations have priority of access to water, to fresh water, the fundamental of all life, yet the corporations have priority. And don't think for one moment that this isn't coming here, unless the people don't just wake up to what's occurring and go, oh my God, that's terrible, but what can you do? Well, we collectively have proven that, for the past 5+ years now, the anti-fracking community has succeeded in keeping this country frack-free. Now, this is just the start. But if we want to protect the resources of this country and make sure that there is the opportunity to return to full food security in this country, then people need to get off of their sofas, get away from the TV, and actually start once again participating in their community. So the downside of what's occurring right now is that unless we do succeed in getting people off the sofa, then the government is going to start looking for ways to creep towards a situation where local authorities have zero input in anything that they consider to be a national infrastructure project. And that includes fracking, and it includes the disposal of toxic nuclear waste. So the likelihood is that the UK will be frack-free in 2018. The big risk is Quadzilla. 15 months into a 6-month project, still haven't reached terminal depth in terms of drilling the well, running into problem after problem, but of course trying to keep everything behind walls so that nobody can see what's occurring. The community in Lancashire, unfortunately, has been somewhat fragmented and perhaps distracted by other internal concerns as opposed to focusing on the real problem. So over the last week or so, I've had a number of phone calls from people in Lancashire, and I know people in Rydale have had a number of phone calls from people in Lancashire saying, how can we in Lancashire achieve what you have achieved in North Yorkshire? Well, first of all, stop fighting each other. There's a common enemy, and that common enemy is Quadzilla. And it's okay for people to disagree. It's okay for people to not want to follow a particular strategy. And that's the beauty of what's worked in Rydale. There were multiple groups. Not everybody saw eye to eye, but they didn't waste time and energy fighting it out on social media. They just went away and got on with whatever it was that they thought was most appropriate to bringing Third Energy to its knees. And they have succeeded. The Achilles heel with Cuadrilla is Centrica, British Gas. Just as Barclays and the Tagger Barclays campaign played a part in bringing about a situation where Barclays refused to put in any more than just the 5 million that Third Energy desperately needed to pay the rental costs for the kit that was sitting on site. But Barclays basically said, that's it. Of course, Barclays Investment's got its own problems anyway, but we'll touch on that later in the week. So, follow the money. The weak link for Cuadrilla is Centrica, British Gas. If British Gas force Centrica to pull the plug on their financial support of Cuadrilla, Cuadrilla has a problem. So, few people have heard of Centrica, so focus on the name they have heard. It's British Gas. And I know that following my live stream on Monday, from the comments beneath the live stream, a number of people already got onto British Gas to tell them that they were moving their energy account to somebody else, and the reason they were moving it was because of British Gas stroke Centrica's support of Cuadrilla and their fracking operations in Lancashire. So there is no magic bullet, there is no panacea. We've been successful collectively at Borkham, at Barton Moss, at Crawberry Hill, at West Newton even. Although you know, in some of these locations that like Borkham and West Newton, there's still the potential that the companies are gonna come back, but they're not back there yet. So there's still some way to go. Success at Upton, at Duddleston, at Wressle, and now at Kirby Misperton, and there's probably one or two others I've missed out. But you get the picture. The unconventional hydrocarbons industry is on the back foot, and it's on the back foot because sufficient people from around the country have stepped up to the plate and realised that unless they get involved, the legacy that they are leaving future generations just doesn't bear thinking about. So don't just watch this video and click like, help share it. And it's not just sharing it around the anti-fracking community, it's getting creative. Not just my videos, everybody's video and blogs. Get them out to groups and communities that are perhaps not directly related to the anti-fracking campaign. It's spreading the word. Let's be careful that we're not just preaching to the converted, preaching to the choir. You know, in an a social media echo chamber, which of course Facebook and YouTube are desperately trying to corral. So just as the establishment tries to get creative, there's way more of us than there is of them. And we have enormous creative capacity between us. So I, for one, am not ecstatic about where we're at right now, but we are in a good place. But we're only in a good place if people step up to the plate and do whatever it is that they believe they can do, are motivated to do, to help bring about this fundamental change and the other changes that we all know we need to see. So thanks for joining me today. Lou Hammond is going to be doing the live stream tomorrow morning because I have other commitments, and I will be back on Friday. But meanwhile, reflect upon where we're at. We are in a good place, but we have to also help Lancashire. Preston New Road is the only location in the UK that is at risk of being fracked in 2018. So let's turn our attention to help the people of Lancashire. And if you could do nothing else, get on to British Gas or look around your community, your family, your friends, and explain to them why it's so important that they move their accounts away from British Gas, and explain to British Gas precisely why they are taking that course of action. Thanks for joining me today, and you have a great day. It's a lovely day here. It's a balmy one, about 6-7 degrees, almost shirt sleeve weather. I'll catch you on Friday morning.